This is your one and only 𝐈𝐸𝐷𝐾81 with your daily dose of video goodness, and today we are going to talk about the hardest hitting Glintstone Sorceries. Let's get to it. So the other day I put out a video comparing maxed out intelligence to maxed out strength to see which one hits harder. And while doing that testing, I came up with the idea to test all of the sorceries at level 99 to see which ones hit the hardest. And the reason I chose to do it at a maxed out level instead of the lowest level possible is because they all have varying amounts of intelligence required for you to be able to cast them, the lowest being at 52, and it just seemed strange to go through and test all of them at level 52, so instead I decided to test them all at max. Now this takes some time to do and do properly, so I'm going to be breaking them up into chunks. So for example, today we are just taking a look at the Glintstone Sorceries, but oh my god, did I fall down a rabbit hole that is going to lead to a string of videos that are going to absolutely blow your mind. But today we're just going to focus on the handful of spells that are referred to as the Glintstone Sorceries. So that would be Crystal Burst, Comet, Cannon of 𝐈𝐸𝐷𝐾, whatever you call that, Star Shower, Glintstone Comet Shard, Gavel of 𝐈𝐸𝐷𝐾, or whatever that person's name is, Shatter Earth, Glintstone Stars, Great Glintstone Shard, Glintstone Pebble, Glintstone Arc, Swift Glintstone Shard, Shard Spiral, Rock Blast, and Crystal Barrage. Now with the exception of Shard Spiral, Rock Blast, and Crystal Barrage, your hardest hitting Glintstone Sorcery is Crystal Burst. Now I say with exception, and that is because those specific spells are kind of their own monster. They're charged and then held for longer attacks. And with the exception of the Shard Spiral, which hits the target multiple times as it passes through it, but gives varying amounts of damage depending on how you hit the target. So if you hit the chunkiest part of the target and it passes through a long target or a thick target, it's going to do more damage than if it passes through a skinny target. So for example, you're going to get more damage out of it hitting one of the large jar creatures than you are hitting a human, because the jar is a thick boy and the humans are not. So I've put those three in kind of their own category that we will talk about here in a second, but our main focus to start with is going to be all of the spells that either just fire right off, or you charge quickly, they fire, and they just do straight damage to the target quickly and easily. Basically your one-off spells. I tested these spells on 3 different targets at 3 different difficulties in order to get an idea of which ones hit. Now, I figured that if they all hit hard on one target, it would be about the same on the other, because it's just going to slowly reduce it. But just to be thorough, I tested them on a test troll, I tested them down in the sewer area, and I tested them over in the 𝐷𝐸𝐽 Dynasty area of Doom, where we farm for runes. Anyway, as I was stating, Crystal Burst, that's going to be your hardest hitting spell, but it comes with a slight caveat, and that is you need to hit with the entire spell. It's basically a shotgun spell, so you would assume that it would hit hard if it's going to hit with the full brunt of a shotgun. So if you're at a distance, it's going to kind of suck. However, if you are at melee range and the target is taking the full brunt of the spell, it hits like an absolute truck. It 1,903 on the troll, down in the sewer guys, 1,846, and over in the old Blood Dynasty, 1,820. Yeah, it's a brute of a spell. That is followed up by Comet. Now, there's something interesting I'm going to talk about a few of these spells, and I'm interested to see if it's the same situation with any other spells like this, but the Comet hit at 1,410 across the board. It's solid damage and it's consistent damage. Then that's followed up by the Cannon, and that was 1,374, once again, across the board. Star Shower performed as we would expect, with lower damage as we get into harder areas. So at the troll was 1,266, the sewers 1,227, and over in the Dynasty 1,213. Glintstone Comet Shard was the same situation. Damage across the board was the exact same at 1,264. The Gavel, 1,242, damage the same across the board. Shattered Earth comes in at 1,339 for the Troll, 1,300 for the Sewer, and 888 over in the Dynasty. And you can see there with a majority of these spells, there is a degrade in the amount of damage as we get into more difficult areas, and that is because things have resistances to magic, and that's that's kind of what we expect to see with everything. But as you notice there, a few of these spells did not perform like that. And the next one on the list here, in order of highest damage to lowest damage, is the Great Glintstone Shard, and that was 890 across the board. Glintstone Stars, 865, 837, followed by the Glintstone Pebble, which was 666, 656, and 652. Next up was the Glintstone Arc at 647, 639, and 632. Last but not least was the Swift Glintstone Shard at 476, followed by 463, followed by 459. Now let's talk about the interesting thing here, and that is the Comet, the Cannon, the Glintstone Comet Shard, the Gavel, and the Great Glintstone Shard. Any enemy that is not considered a boss is going to take the same amount of damage from all of these spells. I went through and tested it on everything from the frozen area to the end game area, all over the map, testing it on different targets, and it was the same situation every time. If it's not some type of boss style monster, it takes the same amount of damage. So for example, dragons take less damage. The fat fire guys over in the frozen area take less damage. The little guys around them take the same amount of damage. The sentinel right before you get to Malakath takes reduced damage. Malakath takes reduced damage. However, every other person in the map that I could find to test this on that wasn't a boss style character takes the same amount of damage. It doesn't matter where it's at on the map. If you attack it with Comet, it's taking 1,410 damage if you have maxed out intelligence and you don't have anything boosting your damage. That means at any point in the game, it's going to act the exact same way, which is extremely interesting, and I'm assuming is a bug, but I just wanted to point that out to you before we get into the next part here. So let's move on to the next part: Shard Spiral, Rock Blaster, and Crystal Barrage. So like I said, Shard Spiral, it varies on damage. So for the Troll, I got 1001. In the Sewers, I got 740. And over in the Mogwin Dynasty, I got 959. Once again, they are really random numbers, and the damage values I was getting on them was extremely inconsistent. Rock Blaster is an ability that you can charge up and hold down and just smack into the target until you run out of mana, doing insane amounts of damage. So therefore, our damage numbers vary depending on what the target was and how much health it has. For example, over in the Sewers, it did 5,499 damage, burning through all of my mana, but it absolutely destroyed the guy we were attacking. Over there in the Old Blood Dynasty though, it only did 1,823 because that was about how much life those guys had, and it stopped doing damage once it burned through all of their health. Same thing with Crystal Barrage. It's the same situation because Crystal Barrage can be held down. Now, it can't be held down for the full extent of your mana. It eventually cuts off, but it can be held down for a period of time, and it does do a massive amount of damage. So for the Troll, it did 3,189, killing the Troll. Over in the Sewer, it did 2,908, taking the Sewer dude's health to about half, and over in the Dynasty, it did 1,707, killing the dude over there that was our test subject in the Dynasty. Now, I went into my editing software for Crystal Barrage because I wanted to see how much damage it did per hit, because it was interesting to see how much damage it was doing and how it was just decimating some of these targets. And it does about 80 damage a tick. On the Troll, it's 79 damage, and in the Sewers, it's 72, and over in the Dynasty, it was doing 70. Now, at some points when I was slowing it down and going frame by frame, it would jump and show a basically double damage, and I guess that's just it adding it up really fast. I don't know exactly how quickly it does the damage or how it decides on how quickly it's doing the damage, but it does stack up. So sometimes it registers and shows double damage, and then other times it shows the proper damage, basically 80 per tick, 72 per tick, and then 70 per tick. Now, just in case you're wondering how that fares to 𝐴𝐸𝐷, I wanted to see if it was actually better damage than the actual just Comet of ʟᴬ. So I went in and I did the same thing with Comet of ʟᴬ, and that spell hits way harder, but its damage is way more sporadic than the actual Crystal Barrage. The Crystal Barrage damage is very steady. You can just see it, and like I said, once in a while it doubles up, but for the most part, it's per tick. It does the same amount of damage. However, the Comet of ʟᴬ is super erratic, but it does a lot more damage a lot faster. Crystal Barrage is pretty good, but it does have its downsides. For example, when you're firing it straight, the enemy can just dodge out of the way and you'll keep firing and just missing the enemy. Now, it does cut off and can restart over pretty quickly, but by the time it does that, if the enemy is fast, in most cases they are, they're going to already be on top of you. So it's not a bad one to start out with for a quick burst of damage, but the damage with the Shard Spiral, the Rock Blaster, and the Crystal Barrage are going to vary so much that I couldn't put any of those at the top of the list because of the fact that the damage is just it's just too erratic to say that you're always going to get this amount of damage. As where with Crystal Burst, if you're close to the target, you're always going to get the same amount of damage if you're close to the target. Now, it's going to vary, obviously, if you're not close to the target, but if you are in melee range, you're always going to get pretty consistent damage. Same thing with the other spells in that first list there, for example, 𝐴𝐸𝐷 and so on. I would say for a close-up, your best Glintstone Sorcery for the highest damage if you are in melee range is Crystal Burst. If you have a target that's all up in your face and constantly in your face, you want to use this spell. It's going to hit really hard. If you are fighting at range and you're able to stay at range, 𝐴𝐸𝐷. 𝐴𝐸𝐷 hits like a truck at 1,410 on almost every target except for boss style targets. If you're hitting a large group of enemies, obviously the cannon is your way to go. Once again, super consistent damage across the board with the exception of boss style enemies. The thing about those three spells is they handle almost any situation that you could find yourself in. Now, they do cost a good bit to cast. For example, 𝐴𝐸𝐷 is relatively expensive, and if you're just gonna go around spamming it all the time, I mean, you're gonna burn through your mana pretty quickly. Your next best option would be the Glintstone Comet Shard, using a little bit less mana and still having pretty consistent damage at 1,264. And once again, that's another one of those ones that is going to do the same amount of damage to every target unless it's a boss style target. All right, we're gonna wrap this one up here. That's pretty much it for this. That's all the data I have so far. Hopefully you found this helpful and informational. If you did and you're interested in the other videos that I'm going to have coming out here that are a result of this rabbit hole that I've fallen down, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be notified when I upload those. I want to give an absolute massive shout out and thank you to my supporters on Patreon for making this episode possible. Y'all are absolutely amazing people. If you would like to join my elite crew of Patreon supporters, please check out the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you're shy, you don't like to comment, just hit that thumbs up button and show your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.